Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. On today's show, we're talking about the process by which economic numbers are reported and what it actually means. But first, today's show is sponsored by the Cost Segregation Guys. If you own investment real estate and haven't looked seriously at cost segregation, you could be leaving significant tax savings on the table. The Cost Segregation Guys help investors accelerate depreciation, improve near-term cash flow, and make more efficient use of capital, all without changing the underlying asset. In a business where preserving cash matters, that's worth paying attention to. If you want to learn more, click on the link in the show notes and you'll be connected directly with them and qualify for a discount because you came from the show. On today's show, we are talking about the process by which the economic numbers are reported by the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Many in the mainstream media are speculating about the chances of the U.S. economy entering a recession later this year. Well, on today's show, I'm going to make the case that the U.S. economy is already in recession and has been for some time. I'm going to further make the case that what's coming later this year is an even deeper recession. Now, as you're listening to this, you might be thinking, oh, come on, Victor, the Bureau of Economic Analysis is responsible for making the determination whether the economy is in recession or not. And so far, they have not produced any data to support your claim. Well, I will be the first to acknowledge that fact. We had a revision of the second and third quarter employment data from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, which showed a reduction in hiring in each of the 6 months in the second and third quarters of last year. Now, you might be thinking falling employment numbers for 6 months is not enough by itself to justify calling it a recession. But you have to remember that the Bureau of Economic Analysis will now take those revised employment figures and plug them into their economic model to remove the income and consumer spending that would have been imputed to all that hiring that didn't actually happen. The GDP numbers are going to get revised downwards, but there's a time lag between the employment numbers and the revised GDP numbers. In fact, major revisions to the numbers can take several months and sometimes up to a year. That's a lag between the employment numbers and the GDP being revised. Now, we don't yet have the revisions for the fourth quarter employment numbers. The other thing to remember is that the employment report has two parts: the employer survey, or what's sometimes called the establishment survey, and the household survey. These should match, and they don't. The discrepancy is over 250,000 jobs for the month of April. Now, let me share two more data points with you. In all 6 of the last times when oil prices increased by 50% or more, the result was a recession. All of them, no exception. Well, here we go again. Now, if someone were to tell me that this time is different, I would not buy it. Next, let's look at consumer credit. We would acknowledge that the market downturn that started in 2008 was pretty severe. In fact, it was so severe, the word recession seemed too weak. The comparisons to 1929 and the start of the Great Depression were definitely being made at the time. But it seemed premature to call it a depression, maybe a little too dramatic in the early years of that downturn. So the term Great Financial Crisis took hold, and that's what stuck in the cultural vernacular. So let's look at consumer credit compared with the bottom of the downturn that started in 2008. In fact, let's look at automotive. During the Great Financial Crisis, auto loan delinquencies rose to around 4.5% overall, with subprime auto loans peaking at about 5% delinquency. At the end of 2025, about 5.2% of U.S. auto loans were at least 90 days overdue, well above the long-term average of about 3.6% in the past decade. The 60-plus day delinquency rate overall was around 1.6%, but for subprime borrowers, it was as high as 6.8%. These delinquency rates are elevated compared to the past decade, especially in the subprime segments. Now, in comparison, the current rate shows overall auto loan delinquency above 5%, which is higher than the crisis era. Subprime auto loans today have delinquency rates near 7%, far surpassing the level seen in 2008. In short, current auto loan stress, especially in subprime, is exceeding what we saw back then. In fact, the average monthly payment for an auto loan in the United States is $767. That is a huge number. When you layer on top of that rising fuel costs, rising insurance, maintenance costs, it's easy to see how transportation costs are now on par with many people's rent. Now, we don't have banks failing like we did in 2008, so it seems like everything must be just fine. But you can't have falling employment, rising oil prices, and record-setting default rates for automotive debt and claim that the economy is doing just fine. Yeah, these default rates are an all-time record. So I'm not here saying definitively that the economy is in recession. What I'm asking is, what are the chances that all of these economic indicators add up to a picture of a growing economy? If that's true, then I might need more sophisticated math than addition and subtraction because the numbers simply don't add up. All of these can only mean one thing, and that's recession. As you think about that, have an awesome rest of your day. Go make some great things happen. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow.